Politician calls single mother lazy on radio. She crowdfunds $3 million in 24 hours. The first blow landed at 4:17 p.m. Delivered through the crackling speakers of a 13-year-old Toyota Corolla that smelled faintly of sour milk and desperation. Ilara Vance was driving, her knuckles white on the peeling steering wheel, her gaze fixed on the river of red taillights bleeding down the interstate. She was already 20 minutes late for her second job. The problem, Grant, the fundamental bedrock problem with this city, is a culture of dependency, a voice, smooth as polished granite and just as cold, announced from the radio. It was Councilman Marcus Thorne, a man whose face was plastered on billboards across the city with the slogan, "A hand up, not a handout." His teeth were too white, his smile too practiced. "We're talking about the housing assistance program," said the host, Grant. "We took a call during the break from a woman, we won't use her name, single mother. Says she works 2 jobs, but is facing eviction." Ilara's heart seized. Her call, the one she'd made an hour ago from a payphone during her 15-minute break at the diner. Her voice trembling as she spoke to a bored-sounding producer. She had felt a sliver of hope then, a foolish, shimmering mirage. Now, she felt only ice water flooding her veins. "And there you have it," Thorne declared, his voice dripping with a condescending paternalism that made Ilara's skin crawl. 2 jobs. Commendable. On the surface. But let's dissect that. What are these jobs? What choices led to this situation? The narrative is always, I'm a victim of circumstance. But true character is forged in refusing to be a victim. It's about ambition. It's about sacrifice. You see it everywhere, Grant. These people, these single mothers, frankly, a lot of them are just lazy. Lazy. The word slammed into Ilara with the force of a physical impact. It wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict, delivered from on high, erasing the 18-hour days, the aching feet, the burns on her arms from the deep fryer, the gnawing anxiety that chewed at her insides while her 6-year-old son, Leo, slept. Erased the memory of her husband, Liam, a firefighter who had charged into a burning building and never come out, leaving her with a mountain of grief and a son who wheezed in his sleep. Thorne continued, his voice resonating with the smug certainty of a man who had never had to choose between paying for an asthma inhaler and paying the electricity bill. They want the government to be a surrogate husband. They want a safety net that becomes a hammock. Instead of working a 3rd job, or getting a better paying skill, they pick up the phone and ask for a handout. It's a failure of personal responsibility, and my administration will be dedicated to ending that cycle. Ilara didn't hear the host's feeble attempt to offer a counterpoint. She was deafened by the roar of blood in her ears. The car felt like it was shrinking around her, the air thick and unbreathable. She saw Marcus Thorne's face on a bus stop bench, his arm around a perfectly coiffed wife and 2 beaming children, a portrait of manufactured success. She pictured him sitting in the soundproofed studio, the plush leather of his chair sighing, as he leaned into the microphone, his world a million miles away from hers. The studio would be chilled to a perfect 68 degrees, the air crisp and clean. Her world was this car, a metal box of stale air and the faint, sweet smell of the cherry air freshener Leo had picked out, now dangling lifelessly from the rearview mirror. It was the crack in the windshield, shaped like a spiderweb, that she'd been meaning to get fixed for 6 months. It was the single worn-out teddy bear buckled into the passenger seat, a silent sentinel watching over a life lived on the margins. The traffic began to move. Ilara's foot found the accelerator, but her mind was stuck, replaying the word, lazy, a single, venomous syllable that had just redefined her entire existence for thousands of listeners. She felt naked, exposed, and utterly, crushingly alone. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Bystanders, trapped in their own cars, were listening. Some were nodding along, she was sure of it. Others were indifferent. None of them knew that the anonymous lazy single mother was the woman in the dented Corolla right next to them, her face a mask of quiet devastation as she drove toward her second job cleaning office buildings. A job that wouldn't end until 2 a.m. The apartment was cold when she finally got home just before 3 in the morning. A single lamp cast a weak, yellow circle of light in the living room, illuminating the worn floral pattern on the sofa and the precarious stacks of Leo's books. The air was heavy with the medicinal scent of the nebulizer machine she ran for him every night. On the kitchen counter, tucked under a magnet shaped like a smiling fire truck, was the official, crinkled edge of an eviction notice. Final notice, it screamed in red ink. She tiptoed into the small bedroom she shared with her son. Leo was a small lump under a faded superhero comforter, his chest rising and falling in a shallow, rattling rhythm that was the soundtrack to her fear. His inhaler lay on the nightstand, next to a crayon drawing. She picked it up. It was a picture of her, a stick figure with wild scribbled brown hair, wearing a red cape. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, it said, "My mum, the superhero." And that's when she broke. It wasn't a loud theatrical collapse. It was a silent, internal implosion. She sank to the floor, her back against the cool wall, and the carefully constructed dams she built every single day burst. The exhaustion of 1,000 shifts, the grief for Liam that still ambushed her in quiet moments, the terror of the eviction notice, and the fresh, raw wound of Marcus Thorne's voice all converged into a single, crushing wave. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. She wasn't a superhero. She was a failure. She was tired. She was everything he'd said she was. Lazy. The word echoed in the silent apartment, a poison seeping into the cracks of her soul. She hugged her knees to her chest, making herself small, as if she could disappear. For a long time, she stayed there, a heap of despair on the linoleum floor. The city outside was asleep. The world was quiet. It was in that profound silence, at her absolute lowest point, that something shifted. It wasn't a lightning bolt of inspiration. It was a tiny, flickering ember of defiance. She thought of Liam. He had never been afraid. He had faced fire. He had run toward danger when everyone else ran away. What would he think of her, hiding in the dark, letting a man like Thorne extinguish her spirit? Then she looked at the drawing again. My mum, the superhero. Leo didn't see a lazy failure. He saw a hero. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Her resolve hardened. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. It was about Leo. She wouldn't let Marcus Thorne, a man who had never walked a mile in her worn-out sneakers, write her story. She got up, her joints aching. She walked to her laptop, a second-hand machine that took 5 minutes to boot up. Her hands, still trembling, hovered over the keyboard. She didn't know what she was going to do. She only knew she couldn't do nothing. She opened a blank document, the white screen a stark canvas against the darkness. And she began to write. She didn't write with anger. She wrote with a stark, brutal honesty. She wrote about the cost of Leo's medication. She wrote about the 2-hour bus ride between her jobs. She wrote about falling asleep on her feet while scrubbing toilets. She wrote about Liam, about the flag they'd given her at his funeral, about how the city that had called him a hero now seemed content to let his family slip through the cracks. She attached a photo of the eviction notice, its red ink like a bleeding wound. She attached a photo of Liam in his dress uniform, his smile so full of life it hurt to look at Dot. She ended it with a simple, direct address to the councilman. Mr. Thorne, you called me lazy. I am not lazy. I am exhausted. I am not asking for a handout. I am asking for a chance to breathe, a chance for my son to grow up in a home where the air is clean and the lights stay on. My name is Alara Vance, and I am not a statistic. I am a person. She hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the mouse. This was terrifying. This was laying her soul bare for the world to see. But the image of Leo's drawing, of his wheezing chest, of Liam's smiling face, pushed her forward. She posted it on her dormant Facebook page, a place usually reserved for sharing photos of Leo's school projects. She had 87 friends. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few sympathetic comments. Then she went to bed, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in months. The spark that lit the fire came from an unexpected place. A young producer at the radio station. A kid named Kevin, who was drowning in student debt and riddled with guilt, had seen her post. A friend of a friend had shared it. He recognized the story instantly. He had been the one who took her call. He had heard the raw, uncut version of Thorne's rant, even more vitriolic than what had aired. Compelled by a pang of conscience, he anonymously sent the full audio file to a popular local blogger known for her anti-establishment bent. By 9 a.m., the story was live. The blog post, titled here, "The Cowardice Councilman Thorne Didn't Want You to Hear," embedded the audio clip alongside Elara's full unedited Facebook post. The escalation was breathtakingly fast. A barista, at the diner where Elara worked her first shift, a compassionate young woman, named Maya, with purple hair and a nose ring, read the blog. She recognized Elara's name immediately. During her lunch break, she found a moment when Elara was refilling salt shakers, her face etched with a familiar weariness. Maya filmed a short, 30-second video on her phone. "This is Alara," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion, keeping the camera on her own face. "I work with her. She's the kindest person I know. Last week, she gave her tips to one of our cooks, whose kid broke his arm. She is not lazy." Then, she flipped the camera. It caught Alara for only a second, a candid, unguarded moment. Alara looked up, startled, a faint, tired smile on her face before she turned away, embarrassed by the attention. That single, fleeting image was devastatingly powerful. It was the face of exhaustion, not laziness. Maya uploaded the video to TikTok and Twitter, pasting the link to the blog post and adding a hashtag, #NotLazy, just tired. By noon, the hashtag was trending in their city. By 3 p.m., it was trending nationally. The internet did what it does best. It amplified a human story into a global event. People weren't just sharing a story. They were sharing a piece of their own struggle. The hashtag became a rallying cry for overworked parents, underpaid gig workers, and anyone who had ever felt invisible and judged by the powerful. Maya, overwhelmed by the response, started a GoFundMe page. She set the goal at $5,000, enough to cover Elira's back rent and a security deposit on a new place. The first donation was for $10, then $25, then $5. The notifications began to pile up, a gentle rain that quickly became a downpour. By 6 p.m., as Ela was finishing her diner shift, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing online, the fund had passed $50,000. An actress, a famous single mother herself, retweeted the story to her 15 million followers with the comment, "We see you. Elira, we are you. #NotLazy, just tired." The floodgates opened. The numbers on the GoFundMe page began to spin like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. $100,000, $250,000, $500,000. When Alara finally got to her second job that night, her phone, which had been in her locker, was a vibrating, glowing brick of notifications. She had hundreds of text messages, missed calls, and Facebook alerts. She opened the GoFundMe link Maya had sent her, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. The number at the top read, $874,321. She dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor of the deserted office building she was supposed to be cleaning. She sank into a plush executive's chair, the kind Marcus Thorne probably owned, and stared into space. The world had tilted on its axis. By the time the sun rose the next morning, 24 hours after Thorne's broadcast, the total had surpassed $3 million. $3 million, donated by strangers from around the world, all united by a single, powerful idea, to repudiate the casual cruelty of one man and lift up the quiet dignity of one woman. Alara Vance, the anonymous, lazy single mother, was now a millionaire. And Councilman Marcus Thorne was about to discover the true meaning of karma. The power flip was swift and brutal. Marcus Thorne woke up to a crisis his seasoned PR team couldn't contain. The story was the lead on every national morning show. His office was bombarded with calls. His major donors, the lifeblood of his political ambitions, were issuing statements, distancing themselves from his unfortunate and inappropriate remarks. The party leadership, smelling blood in the water, publicly condemned him. He scheduled a press conference for noon, a desperate attempt to stanch the bleeding. He stood at a podium, his wife Serafina at his side, a frozen sculpture in a tasteful navy dress. Her expression was a perfect, unreadable mask of supportive spousal stoicism. "My words were taken out of context," he began, his voice lacking its usual confident timbre. "I have the utmost respect for working mothers. It was a clumsy choice of words in a broader conversation about economic policy. But the internet had the receipts. Bloggers were live streaming the press conference, intercutting his pathetic apology with the audio of his actual venomous rant. The split was damning. #LazyThorne started trending. Meanwhile, Alara was being courted by the same networks that were eviscerating Thorne. She agreed to one interview with a female journalist known for her empathy. She didn't do it from a fancy studio. She did it from her own cramped living room, sitting on her worn sofa, the superhero drawing taped to the wall behind her. She wore a simple gray sweater. She looked tired, overwhelmed, but her voice was steady. She didn't gloat. She didn't attack Thorne. She simply told her story. "I don't think Mr. Thorne is an evil man," she said, her words carrying a weight that silenced the studio. "I think he's a man who lives in a world very different from mine. He sees people like me as numbers, on a spreadsheet, not as human beings. The $3 million. It's not for me. It's a message. It's a message from people everywhere who are tired of being invisible. Her grace was more damning than any attack could have been. She wasn't playing his game. She was rising above it. The public perception solidified. Thorne was a bully. Ilara was a saint. His brand, built on the image of a tough but fair leader, evaporated. His book deal was cancelled. His lucrative speaking engagements were rescinded. He became a pariah overnight. The money that had poured into Ilara's account was a direct, symbolic transfer of power. His political career wasn't just over, it was a cautionary tale. The day after her interview, a sleek black town car pulled up outside Ilara's apartment building. The woman who stepped out was impossibly elegant, her posture rigid, her face familiar from the disastrous press conference. It was Serafina Thorne. She buzzed the apartment. Ilara, hesitant, let her in. Serafina stood in the middle of the small living room, her expensive heels looking absurd on the scuffed linoleum. She looked at the superhero drawing on the wall, her lips a thin, tight line. "I suppose you're enjoying this," Serafina said, her voice brittle. "I'm not enjoying any of it," Ilara replied honestly. "It's a lot. He's ruined, you know," Serafina said, not looking at her. "Everything we built, gone. Because of a single word." "It wasn't the word," Ilara said softly. "It was the sentiment behind it." Serafina finally turned to face her, and for the first time, Ilara saw a crack in the perfect mask. There was a deep, profound pain in her eyes. "You've always had this effect, haven't you?" Serafina murmured, a strange bitterness in her tone. "Things just happen for you." Ilara stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about? We've never even met." Serafina let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass. She walked over to a small photo on the bookshelf, the one of Liam in his uniform. She picked it up, her gloved fingers tracing the glass. "Oh, we've met," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She turned around, her eyes locking with Ilaros. The reveal landed not like a bombshell, but like a quiet, devastating shard of ice. "My maiden name was Carmichael, Serafina Carmichael. Does that mean anything to you, Ilara?" Ilara's world, which had just been put back on its axis, tilted violently again. Carmichael. It was her mother's maiden name. Her mother, who had died when she was a child, had an older daughter from her first marriage, a daughter who had been sent to live with a wealthy father after the divorce, a daughter Ilara had never known, an estranged sister. You're my sister," Ilara breathed, the words feeling alien in her mouth. "I am," Serafina confirmed, her face a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. "And the man in this photograph, the hero firefighter, Liam Vance." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "He was my first love. We were going to get married, and then he met my sweet, innocent little sister at a family reunion you barely remember, and he chose you." The twist reframed everything. The years of silence weren't just about class or shame. The cold, vacant look on the stage next to her husband wasn't just spousal duty. It was the culmination of 2 decades of festering resentment, jealousy, and heartbreak. Her husband attacking Ilara on the radio wasn't just a random political misstep. For Serafina, it must have felt like a bizarre, cosmic justice. A validation of her long-held belief that Ilara was somehow unworthy of the happiness she had stolen. She had stood by her husband, not just as a political wife, but as a woman, watching her lifelong rival finally get her comeuppance, only to watch it backfire in the most spectacular way imaginable. Ilara sank onto the sofa, her mind reeling. The woman who had stood silently by as her husband publicly humiliated her was her own flesh and blood. A ghost from a past she never knew, haunted by a love she had never known about. The revelation shattered Ilara's black and white view of the world. Serafina wasn't just a villain's wife. She was a woman steeped in her own tragedy, her cruelty born from a deep, unhealed wound. It didn't excuse her complicity, but it made it human. It made it messy. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, financial advisors, and non-profit consultants. The $3 million sat in a trust account, a silent, powerful entity that hummed with potential. And with it came a profound moral dilemma. A sharp, fast-talking political consultant named Julian Croft came to see her. He had the hungry look of a shark that smelled blood. Ilara, you have a once-in-a-generation opportunity here, he said, pacing her small living room like a caged panther. Thorne is wounded, but he's not dead. Rich men have a way of surviving. But with a fraction of this money, we can make sure he's buried politically, forever. He laid out a plan, a series of brutal, targeted attack ads. Funding for a primary challenger who would hit Thorne from the right on his fiscal hypocrisy. An investigative journalism fund to dig into every deal he'd ever made. We can destroy him, Julian said, his eyes gleaming. We can make an example of him so that no politician ever dares to whisper the word lazy again. It's justice. And it was tempting. It was so tempting. The part of her that had wept on the floor, the part of her that had felt the sting of public shame, screamed for retribution. She could use Thorne's own tactics against him. She could use this money, this power the world had given her, to exact a perfect, righteous revenge. It felt wrong, but in a way that was undeniably, deliciously tempting. To see him utterly broken, to know she had been the architect of his demise, it was a siren song of karmic payback. She spent sleepless nights wrestling with the choice. One path was vengeance, the other was still unclear, she thought. Of Seraphine's confession, destroying Marcus would also mean destroying what was left of her sister's life, a life already built on a foundation of loss and bitterness. Did she owe her sister anything? No, but did she want to be the reason for her complete ruin? The dilemma crystallized into a single question. What kind of person did she want to be? Did she want to become a mirror of the man she despised, using power and money as a weapon? Or did she want to build something new, using it as a tool? The turning point came during a visit to Leo's asthma specialist. The clinic was overcrowded, the air filled with the sound of coughing children. A young mother was at the counter, trying to argue with the receptionist. Her card declined for a copay. The look on the mother's face, a mixture of shame, fear, and desperation, was one Ilara knew intimately. In that moment, she saw the path forward with blinding clarity. The battle wasn't against Marcus Thorne. The battle was against the circumstances that created women like her and the mother at the counter. Thorne was just a symptom. The disease was the system that let them fall. 2 weeks later, Marcus Thorne walked into the diner. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. The breakfast rush was over. Was wiping down a booth when the bell over the door chimed. He looked like a ghost. His suit was rumpled. His face was pale and unshaven. And the confident swagger was gone, replaced by the stooped shoulders of a defeated man. He slid into the booth she had just cleaned, the red vinyl sighing under his weight. This was the visual, the unforgettable moment. The once powerful councilman, who had pontificated about her life from a sterile radio studio, was now here, in her territory, surrounded by the smell of bacon grease and stale coffee. The power dynamic had been so completely inverted, it felt like a scene from a surrealist film. He was a king in exile, begging for an audience with the peasant he had wronged. Ilara approached the table, a coffee pot in her hand. She felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone, replaced by a kind of weary pity. "Councilman," she said, her voice even. "Mrs. Vance." "Ilara," he stammered, not looking at her. I came to apologize. In person what I said. It was monstrous, inexcusable. I was arrogant. I was wrong." He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "They're initiating a recall. My life it's over. But Serafina, this is destroying her. If you could just make a statement, say you forgive me. Anything to stop the bleeding." Here it was, her chance to twist the knife. Her chance to say, "You deserve this." She looked at this broken man, and she didn't see a monster. She saw her sister's husband. She saw a man so insulated by privilege that he had lost all connection to humanity. And she saw a man who was already living in a prison of his own making. Ilara held up the coffee pot. "Would you like a refill?" she asked. The question hung in the air, so mundane, so utterly out of place, that it was devastating. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't condemnation. It was dismissal. It was a statement that he was no longer a factor in her world. He was just another customer in a diner. He stared at her, uncomprehending. Then, a slow, painful flush crept up his neck. He understood. He pushed himself out of the booth and walked out of the diner without another word. Ilara watched him go, then calmly walked to the next table and began wiping it down. The next day, Ilara held her own press conference. She didn't stand at a podium. She sat at a simple table in a community center gymnasium. Behind her was a banner that read, "The Liam Vance Foundation." "A lot of people have been asking what I'm going to do with the money that was so generously given to me," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Some people wanted me to use it for revenge, to tear down the man who insulted me. But my husband, Liam, he didn't tear things down. He built things. He ran into burning buildings to save people. not to punish the fire. Vengeance builds a cage for yourself. Grace builds a ladder for everyone. She announced the formation of a foundation in her late husband's name. Its mission was twofold: to provide immediate, no questions asked, emergency financial aid to the families of first responders, and to offer grants and support to single-parent households struggling with housing and medical costs. She had turned an instrument of potential revenge into an engine of communal hope. The story had its final, satisfying chapter. It wasn't about a politician's downfall. It was about a community's resilience and a woman's quiet, unshakable grace. Cruelty always collects its debt, but compassion pays dividends for generations. Where are you reading this from? Drop your city, your state, your country. See how far this story travels. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next justice twist.